Hello, hello, hello. Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm simultaneously doing this on Twitter Spaces and on my YouTube channel. It looks like we have about 58 people watching on YouTube, and we have only a few people right now on the Twitter Space. We'll see if the Twitter Space grows. I'll be interacting with people on the chat on YouTube and also interacting with people in the Twitter Space. The difference is the people in the Twitter Space, when I bring them up, will be able to speak and you'll be able to hear them on YouTube. The chats, I'll have to read them to people. So uh, what we have here is the Q1 2023 shareholder deck. And if you are watching this, if you're listening to this on the Twitter space, I'm going to try to describe everything, but you can download the Q1 2023 shareholder deck from Tesla, ir.tesla.com. And I recommend reading it while we're talking about this. This is just I'm trying something different. And if you're in the Twitter space right now, could you please just oh, shoot. Sorry. I had my mic muted for the Twitter space. I'm sorry about that. So just to restart, I'm on YouTube at the same time I'm on Twitter. I'm going to be going through the Q1 2023 shareholder deck. The shareholder deck is available for download at ir.tesla.com. The Q1 2023 shareholder deck is helpful for understanding what's happening in the Q2 report, because the thing we get before we actually have the earnings call is we get the shareholder deck. And so the document that's on screen on YouTube and that you can download from ir.tesla.com goes through that. I'll describe for the Twitter space people, I'm going to describe what I show on screen on YouTube. And I'm recording this video, so I'll post this video on Twitter later so people can watch the video version of this. So let me head over to this shareholder deck. And the third page of the document has highlights and a summary. So for people who are watching on, I need to move myself on the screen here. For people who are watching on YouTube, you can read this summary. I'm going to read this out loud. I want to stress what's important from what I'm about to read is they're talking about Tesla's strategic advantage, and they're talking about why this stuff really matters for the long term. One of my focuses in this video and Twitter space is focusing on long term. I'm a long term investor. I'm not selling my stock tomorrow. I did, by the way, full disclosure, I bought stock. I think it was Friday. I bought 200 shares of Tesla stock. I own a lot of Tesla stock. I'm basically an all-in investor. I do have some cash right now because I didn't use all of it because I have reasons why I need that cash for personal reasons. But I'm way over 90% Tesla stock in my portfolios, in my net worth, I should say, not just my portfolios, but my entire net worth. So in the summary statement, they say, in the current macroeconomic environment, we see this year as a unique opportunity for Tesla, as many car makers are working through challenges with the unit economics of their EV programs. We aim to leverage our position as a cost leader. Okay, as a cost leader, this is important. Tesla is producing EVs at lower cost than other EV makers, so they are a cost leader. We are focused on rapidly growing production, and they have been rapidly growing production, investments in autonomy and vehicle software, and remaining on track with our growth investments. So now keep in mind, when we get the Q2 shareholder deck, the summary might be a little different. I think the long-term focus will be about the same, but the summary might be somewhat different. We can't know until we see it, but that's the kind of thing we're looking at. Lights that shift word your way turning would be nice. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I guess I can use the, let me, I've got a little arrow just for people who are watching on YouTube. This is the paragraph I just read. Let's move to the next paragraph. Our near-term pricing strategy. This is actually, I think, a question that's going to be asked in the Say Technologies list of questions. How Tesla does its near-term pricing strategy. And they've already answered the question in a previous earnings call, but our near-term pricing strategy considers a long-term view on per-vehicle profitability, given the potential lifetime value of a Tesla vehicle through autonomy, supercharging, connectivity, and service. We expect that our product pricing will continue to evolve upwards or downwards depending on a number of factors. The basic story is they're going to price the vehicles so they can sell all the ones they make. And the more vehicles they get on the road, the more vehicles they can make money on from autonomy and supercharging, connectivity, and service later. If you have 10 million vehicles on the road, you can make more from them 5 years from now than you can make if you only have 5 million vehicles on the road. If you think autonomy is going to become real and you're going to make $100,000 a year per vehicle or $10,000 a year per vehicle, having those vehicles on the road is better than not having those vehicles on the road and not having produced them. So the goal is to increase production as much as possible so you can get as many vehicles on the road so you can make as much money from them later. And not just that, but accelerate the transition to sustainable energy by getting more electric vehicles on the road, replacing more internal combustion engine vehicles. So moving to the third paragraph of the summary, although we implemented price reductions on many vehicle models across regions in the first quarter, our operating margins reduced at a manageable rate. We expect ongoing cost reduction of our vehicles, including improved production efficiency at our newest factories and lower logistics costs, and remain focused on operating leverage as we scale. I'm going to get into the operating margins later. There's some really good news about operating. When we get into the numbers on this slide, shareholder deck, there's some good news here. But this is an important thing. They implemented price reductions. I think they continue to implement price reductions, but they're having cost reductions. So as Giga Texas and Giga Berlin in particular scale, as those factories grow in terms of production, their costs per vehicle go down because you've got to amortize the cost of the factory over the number of vehicles you produced. And if you produce a smaller number of vehicles, and I think there's other expenses of operating the factory, all the machinery inside, as you use your machinery more effectively, you're producing more vehicles with the same machinery. And there's other, as you use your labor more efficiently, your labor efficiency goes up. So that side of cost reduction is improving as they scale. Giga Berlin has increased productivity. Giga Texas has increased productivity, so that should get better. I'm not sure about lithium. I think the price of lithium has come down, but the price of Tesla's lithium contracts may not have come down yet. So we'll see about that. Okay. And so we'll talk about operating leverage in a minute. So then the fourth paragraph is one that I feel like Wall Street is completely missing. I feel like most people who are looking at Tesla are completely missing this. We are rapidly growing, and I'm going to emphasize this later in this video. We are rapidly growing energy storage production capacity at our mega factory in Lathrop, and we recently announced a new mega factory in Shanghai. We are also continuing to execute on our product roadmap, including Cybertruck, our next generation vehicle platform, autonomy, and other AI-enabled products. Let's talk about energy for a second. And you're going to see this in the numbers. Tesla is rapidly growing energy storage, and you're going to see that shortly. And most analysts are not catching this, and I'm going to show you in the numbers why this matters, why this is going to be a big deal, and why this matters long-term rather than short. It matters a little bit short-term. I personally think Tesla, I hate making short-term predictions about margins and earnings per share. I think that the energy numbers are going to start rising faster, and that Wall Street is underestimating that, and that is going to push up revenue, total revenue, and earnings per share. I think that margins will improve in energy storage. Revenue is going to improve in energy storage, and that's going to translate to higher energy revenue and higher energy profits. And that's something that I feel like Wall Street is missing. The last paragraph here, our balance sheet and net income enable us to continue to make these capital expenditures in line with our future growth. In this environment, we believe it makes sense to push forward to ensure we lay a proper foundation for the best possible future. You're going to see this. They increased capital expenditure. That's investing in the future. Tesla is investing in the future. They are investing more money and building more. I believe they're actually going to build multiple next generation gigafactories starting soon. And building more factories faster means you have higher revenue. Not the higher revenue you're going to get from having those factories come sooner. Those profits come sooner. Getting more vehicles on the road for when autonomy happens means you make more money sooner, and you accelerate the transition to sustainable energy, which is the company's goals. So on the left side of the page, I'm not going to talk about this that much, but you have operating margin. You just have like numbers: operating margin, operating income, GAAP net income. I think that most of these numbers are relatively unimportant. They did say operations, Cybertruck factory tooling on track, producing alpha versions. Now, we just had a tweet from Tesla that the first Cybertruck had been produced. I believe, this quarterly report from Q1 was 3 months ago. It appears that they've gone past producing beta versions and they're actually producing a production version of the vehicle, but we can't be sure about that. I think it's trial production. I don't know when they get to full-on production. They mentioned that Model Y was the best-selling vehicle in Europe in Q1. It was the best-selling vehicle in the US in Q1, excluding pickups. Model Y, I believe, is now the best-selling vehicle in the world, so we can expect that to change. All right, let's move on to the next page. The next page is where we start getting into numbers. And for the people who are on Twitter, I'm sorry, You can't see this unless you get the document yourself. But let me drink myself on the page here. Okay, so the top line that you have in the financial summary, this is the financial summary, which is, I believe, page 4, or it's page, I think it's page 4 of the slide deck, but it's showing as page 3. Total automotive revenue was just under 20 billion. It was actually down from Q4 of 2022, and it was only up 18% year on year. Okay, that's one thing. Now you look at the energy storage and storage revenue, energy generation and storage revenue line, which is the next line, and you see $1.5 billion in energy generation and storage revenue, and it increased 148% year on year. This number is actually lower than it should be, and I think this number is going to grow in this coming quarter. I think we're going to see energy revenue start to really pop. You get total GAAP gross margins. I think some of these numbers are going to be in more detail in later parts of the document. Operating expenses is really important on this sheet. What you can see Q1 2023 is that operating expenses, this is not cost of producing the vehicles, this is the cost of operating the business, is 1.8 billion. It's actually lower than Q4, and it's lower than Q1 a year ago. So they've actually managed to keep operating expenses in line. As the company is growing dramatically, radically increasing in size, revenue increased $5 billion from Q1 2022 to Q1 2023, but operating expenses stayed flat. That's a really positive sign. If you're able to grow your company without growing operating expenses, it's easier to grow your operating profit. And operating profit leads to net profit. So I'm not going to focus on a lot of these other numbers. Capital expenditure is the one I wanted to mention. Towards the bottom, it's the third line from the bottom of the financial summary on page 3 or 4 of the PDF. You see that in the previous quarters, they were under $2 billion in capital expenditure. They've increased capital expenditure to over $2 billion. I expect this number to keep growing as they're growing the company. And that actually led to relatively low free cash flow, but their cash pile is $22 billion. That's a lot of free cash. That's a lot of cash to have on hand. So if Tesla needs to make a big investment, they can make a big investment. There's a financial summary continues here. They talk about how there's positive growth in vehicle deliveries, positive growth in other parts of the business, reduced average selling price. This is something a lot of people focus on, that Tesla is, because they're discounting the cars, the average selling price is diminishing. There's two things. One, they lower prices, but two, as Model Y increases its share of the vehicles sold, it shifts from the percentage of revenue from Model 3 to Model Y, and Model Y sells for a higher price than Model 3. So to some extent, that's better, but it also shifts from Model S and X, which are much higher price, but very low volume. And there was a negative foreign exchange impact because I think the dollar is strong. Operating income, they had growth in vehicle deliveries, growth in gross profit from energy business. Again, reduced average selling price, higher raw material, commodity, logistics, and warranty costs. Is that going to be getting better? For those who are looking short term, this is a question that you care about. What's going on with raw material costs, particularly lithium, nickel, other raw materials? They mentioned specifically the cost of the production ramp of 4680 cells. I expect that problem to continue. They are improving the ramp of 4680 cells, but they seem to be a long way from getting fully ramped. It's been hard to get 4680 going, so that's still going to be a drain. And lower credit revenue, I don't think that's a particularly big deal. Their cash position we just discussed before. Okay, operational summary is a big page. This is probably one of the most important pages in the document. One other page I want to focus on, but this is a very important page. You can see that the top line here, Model S and X production has been flat for 3 quarters in a row, and they reported Model S and X production already, and it's still flat. So we're not seeing significant growth in Model S and X. I personally think Model S and X are relatively unimportant for the company's future. I own a Model X. I think the Model S is the greatest sedan on the planet. The Model X is the greatest SUV on the planet. I think they're wonderful vehicles. They're just too expensive. I think Tesla at some point needs to do a complete redesign, at least of Model X. Model X sells more than Model S. I think Tesla needs to do a complete redesign of both vehicles, but particularly Model X. If Tesla can produce a Model X that is under $80,000, that they can sell for under $80,000, get a $7,500 tax credit, basically make a larger version of Model Y with a bigger third row and maybe some more batteries so you can get more range out of it. I think if Tesla could do that, then that vehicle, like they're selling 80,000 S's and X's combined in a year, I think they'd sell 250,000 Model X's if they came out with a version that was less expensive. Model 3 and Y production, Previous quarter was 421,000. I believe the latest quarter was, I have this on this. The latest quarter was 460,000 produced. So big jump, big jump in Model 3 and Y production. So total production 440,000 versus 480,000. So they jumped production by a huge margin. Deliveries was 466,000 versus versus deliveries of, oh, sorry, I'm still working on this, versus deliveries of 422,000. So you saw a big jump in deliveries. That should mean a big jump in auto revenue. Even though average selling price may be a little bit lower, there's a big jump in total in auto revenue. So that's going to be a positive. And that's something that Wall Street's already accounted for. And I want to skip down to, we got solar deployed, which has been flat for a while. I mean, yes, 67 was more than 48 from the previous quarter, but solar deployed was down from the 3 previous quarters significantly. It doesn't seem like Tesla has the solar in order, but the big thing here is storage deployed. This is the thing that I think is probably, along with energy generation and revenue, energy generation and storage revenue, this storage deployed line is huge. In Q1 of 2022, Tesla deployed 846 megawatt hours of, 846 megawatt hours of storage. In Q1 of 2023, they deployed nearly 4 gigawatt hours, nearly 4,000 megawatt hours. It was a 360% increase. I want to go back. See here, storage deployed increased 360% year on year. If we go back to energy generation and storage revenue, it's only increased 148%. This is something that cannot continue. If energy storage deployed is growing by 300+% a year, then energy revenue has to catch up. So I'm predicting that this 1.5 billion number from Q1 of 23 and 3, I skipped back a couple pages for those who can't see the document. Energy generation and storage revenue was 1.5 billion in Q1 of 2023. And if you go and what's happening is it's rising so fast, I think that energy revenue is lagging storage deployed. So storage deployed was 2.4 gigawatt hours before in Q4 and went up to 3.4 gigawatt hours. I think we're going to see energy. I think we can expect to see energy generation storage revenue jump over 2 billion. Most people are predicting less than 2 billion. And then really the big thing is, if you just look at this number, let's call it 4 gigawatt hours. It's 3.889, so 3.9 gigawatt hours. If Tesla is making in the ballpark of $500 a kilowatt hour, a megapack has 4 megawatt hours and costs $2 million. So that works out to $500 a kilowatt hour. And it works out to $500 million a gigawatt hour. So $500 million a gigawatt hour, this would be $2 billion basically on its own. And then you add in revenue from solar and whatever other energy revenue you have. And so that's why I think Tesla's at some point has to go over $2 billion. But is it shifted? Is the lag from energy storage deployed 2 quarters or 1 quarter? How long is it? And then the other big question is, how much storage will be deployed in Q2? Because they publish the number of vehicles they delivered. They don't publish the amount of storage deployed or solar deployed. At some point, will they start telling us when they tell us the number of vehicle production deliveries, will they tell us storage deployed? I don't think they will. But I think this number is going to go up substantially. This should be over 5 gigawatt hours and maybe 6 gigawatt hours. Because they've talked about this growing at 200 to 300% a year. It's growing 360% a year as we see it now. I think that rate has slowed down. So, all right, so that's the stuff I wanted to talk about on that page. I'm going to move on to, okay, page 7 of the document is, I think, one of the most important pages. In particular, I'm looking at there's a chart in the upper right corner that's called Installed Annual Vehicle Capacity. What it shows for the current quarter for Q1 was California Model S and X was capacity of 100,000 in production. Model 3 and Y capacity 550,000 production. Shanghai Model 3 and Model Y greater than 750,000 production. Now, along with that, we just heard that Tesla delivered 247,000 vehicles in Q2. Tesla Shanghai deliver 247,000 vehicles to customers. That is effectively a rate of 1 million a year. So to say greater than 750,000 is a massive understatement. Giga Shanghai can produce 1 million a year. At least in the ballpark, darn close to 1 million a year. They've delivered almost 250,000. If they do 250,000, it's 1 million a year. They did 240,000, 7,000 deliveries. They may have produced more than 250,000. So saying they're only, so is this number going to change? This is the question when we look at this chart. Is this number going to change? We've got a number right here, 750, greater than 750,000. Is the Shanghai number going to go up? Now we've got Berlin and Texas. The previous quarter, it said Berlin was greater than 350,000 capacity and Texas was greater than 250,000 capacity for Model Y. Are those numbers going to go up? We expect that Berlin will eventually hit 500,000 capacity. We expect that Texas will eventually hit 500,000 capacity on Model Y. I think it's likely that Texas will produce more than that or capable of producing more than that. We'll see. I don't know what their expectations are long term. It sounded like their expectation for Berlin and Texas was 500,000 each. So, and then Cybertruck is listed as tooling. So we can expect that Cybertruck is going to change. Below Cybertruck, you see Nevada Tesla Semi was in pilot production. So will Cybertruck read pilot production or will it read production? I don't know the answer to that question. And how meaningful is it? And when does it shift to production from pilot production? That's an open question we don't know the answer to because Semi is delivering in extremely low volumes right now. That's being produced in extremely low volumes. As far as we know, Cybertruck is only being produced in extremely low volume so far. So are they going to call that pilot production? Or are they going to call it full production? I don't know the answer. The last thing that I'm going to focus on, we see Roadster is to be decided where it's going to be produced and it's in development. We see Robotaxi and others in development. And others is interesting. That's probably a van. That's probably something else. It's others plural. We got a van. I don't know what else they're thinking of producing besides a van. But Robotaxi is the next generation vehicle, the Model 2, some people call it, the Tesla Compact. I like to call it the Tesla Q just for fun. We now know that they are planning to produce that vehicle. Unequivocally, Tesla announced that they're going to be building a factory in Mexico to produce this next generation vehicle. I also heard from a very persuasive and authoritative source, not going to name names, but it was in a Twitter space and it was public. I don't feel comfortable naming the name, who said that Elon was working on factory design for the next generation gigafactories in Texas and Mexico. So I think we're going to see a next generation factory go up in Mexico soon. We also saw that land has been cleared at Giga Berlin. So it's likely we're going to see a next generation factory in Giga Berlin fairly soon. There were some permit applications going on. I'm not sure if that was for inside the existing factory or for the next factory. And there's no reason why they would leave China out. It seems unlikely that Tesla would leave China out in building a next generation factory. And then there's the prospect of Japan and there's the prospect of India. There's been a lot of talk about India. I'm the only one who talks about Japan, but I think Japan makes a lot of sense. So, what changes will we see in this document? We have to expect that Mexico will be added, that Robotaxi will be in development for Mexico. Will we see Texas also have a listing for Robotaxi? Will they disclose that now? I don't know. Will they disclose any other locations for Robotaxi? And maybe this comes in future quarters, but my prediction is that Tesla will build at least 2 of these factories quickly, and as long as they're building them, they might as well build them in Shanghai and Berlin as well. The demand is so huge for these. So that's an interesting question. Let me just turn to, so that's important. I'm leaving out the market share graphic at the bottom, and I'm going to turn to the left side of the page, vehicle capacity. Again, this is something that we will see changes in the Q2 slide deck, and this is the kind of thing that I focus on rather than whatever questions Say Technologies asks, whatever Wall Street analysts asks, whatever's said in the call. I think we tend to learn more from the shareholder deck, but people tend to focus more on what did Elon say rather than what did the shareholder deck say. So vehicle capacity in Q1, we produced a record number of vehicles thanks to ongoing ramps of our factories in Austin and Berlin. I think we know we produced a record number of vehicles again in Q2. We already know that. So we expect to see that again. We remain committed to reducing the percentage of vehicles delivered in the third month. They've been trying to make deliveries smooth throughout the quarter rather than having them pile up at the end of the quarter. It doesn't seem like they've made a lot of progress on that. So it'll be interesting to see if they ever make progress on that and start having deliveries be more smooth over the quarter. Talking about US, California, Nevada, and Texas, Model Y was best-selling non-pickup vehicle in the US in Q1. Showcased 4680 cell production. Production rate continued to improve sequentially, so hopefully we'll have more news on 4680 production. Equipment installation for Cybertruck production at Gigafactory Texas continued in Q1 and remains on track. They should now be telling us equipment installation for Cybertruck production is complete and production has begun, or pilot production has begun. They talked about China, Shanghai. We do not expect meaningful increase of weekly production run rate. So it appears that China is at its full capacity at producing around 250,000 a quarter. Launch sales in Thailand, new market supplied out of Shanghai. I think they may have opened up a couple other markets, maybe Malaysia. And Shanghai remains our export hub. And they talked about Brandenburg. The Model Y production in Germany produced over 5,000 vehicles in a week towards the end of Q1. Model Y became the best-selling vehicle of any kind in Europe. So we know that Model Y is now the best-selling vehicle in the world. So we'll see if they say anything about that. Okay, I'm probably going to skip the next page. They have a page called Core Technology. We talk about autopilot and full self-driving. So we'll have more details on that. We have battery powertrain manufacturing. I think that this is an important page to read and understand, but it's hard to pick out like a little detail here or there that tells us more about I mean, there's a lot of broader things that tell us more about the future of the company. We'll see. And of course, I guess I should mention, maybe the cute, for those who follow me closely, you know, I think that Project Highland is fiction. I have a new t-shirt, Project Highland, that mother's not real. So you can check out the t-shirt on elonbits.com, and I'm wearing the insanely gigantic shirt. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. But you can look at a variety of things on this page. You know, they got core technology. The next page, they got, they talk about some technological changes they're making, whether it's with FSD or with battery powertrain and manufacturing. But it's not a lot to sink your teeth into on those pages. They did say energy storage on the other highlights page. Let me move down to this. We're right here, folks. For those who are watching on YouTube, you can see where the red arrow is. Energy storage deployments increased by 360% year on year in Q1 to 3.9 gigawatt hours, the highest level of deployments we've achieved to an ongoing megafactory ramp. Megafactory ramp is going more. The ramp of our 40 gigawatt hour megapack factory in Lathrop has been successful with still more room to reach full capacity. So that's an important detail here. That's it right here. It's a 40 gigawatt hour plant, and they have room to reach full capacity. They produced 4 gigawatt hours. 40 megawatt hour plant would mean 10 gigawatt hours a year, so they can continue to ramp up to 10 gigawatt hours a quarter. And we're only at 4 gigawatt hours a quarter, so there's room to grow there. And then they're going to be building a factory in Shanghai. And my guess is the factory at Shanghai, which is supposed to produce the same as Lathrop, will overperform Lathrop. That's just the way Tesla is. And it says this megafactory, this is huge language here on the previous document. This megafactory will be, sorry. Those who are watching, I'm messing up with my slide. For those who are listening on Twitter, I'm messing up with my slide. This megapack factory will be the first of many. They're going to be building many megafactories. So they got one going up in Shanghai. Construction starting later this year. So construction of megafactory Shanghai will start later this year. We know how fast Shanghai operates. We can expect that that factory, once it's started, will be done in less than a year, and it'll be ramped in less than a year mostly ramped in less than a year after that. So storage is going to go from 4 gigawatt hours a quarter to 10 gigawatt hours a quarter to 20 gigawatt hours a quarter. 20 gigawatt hours a quarter. 20 gigawatt hours at $500 a kilowatt hour is $10 billion in revenue. That's a big deal, right? That's what's coming. That's why this matters so much. Because we only have, what was the total revenue? The total revenue for the quarter was $23 billion. So if you're going to get to $10 billion in energy revenue, up from $1.5 billion in energy revenue, it's probably more than that when you add in solar. That's just a monster big deal. They talked about solars. They didn't really have a lot to say about solar. I think there's this open question. When will they say something more about solar? When is something going to happen about solar? I will say on this, Elon said in a Twitter space about XAI that he expects there's going to be a shortage in voltage transformers supplying distribution of electricity from the grid to, I think primarily he's talking about to AI training supercomputer clusters. But there's going to be a shortage of those. It's going to affect a lot of things, and electric vehicles use a lot of electricity, so that could affect them. And then he said a year later he expects to see an electricity generation shortage. So my guess is that at some point Tesla's going to roll out a massive increase in solar production and deployment. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to start. I don't know when they're going to talk about it. And this is just speculation on my part, but long term, I think given that Elon's concerns about the availability of sufficient energy generation, I expect Tesla to say, you know what, we're just going to start building solar farms. And we did just see that it seems like they're deploying some mega packs at Giga Texas. And Tesla has its own energy startup, Tesla, its own electricity startup in Texas. Will we see more of that so that Tesla can assure its supply of electricity for the things that it needs, for superchargers, for factory production, etc., as well as for AI training supercomputers that Tesla has a big deal on. So then they have an outlook section. Volume, we're planning to grow production as quickly as possible and in line with the 50% cumulative annual growth target we began guiding to in early 2021. In some years, we may grow faster, and some we may grow slower, depending on a number of factors. For 2023, we expect to remain ahead of the long-term 50% CAGR with around 1.8 million cars for the year. Now, I don't know how they get that being more than 50% growth because 1.8 million cars is not more than 50% compared to the previous year, but it is more than 50% compared to if you go back to, say, when they produced 500,000 vehicles in a year. This is faster than that. I think what we're going to see is this is roughly 35 to 40% growth compared to the previous quarter. I think they're going to beat 1.8 million at this point. I think they're going to produce at least 1.9 million, maybe 2 million. But the real growth is going to be when they start building next generation vehicle factories. And if they build a lot of them, you could see growth really fast. And I think we get to 10 million vehicles by 2026 is my prediction. Maybe it's 2027. Then down on cash, we have sufficient liquidity to fund our product roadmap, etc. They manage the business so we maintain a strong balance sheet. Profit. While we continue to execute on innovations to reduce the cost of manufacturing operations, over time we expect our hardware-related profits to be accompanied with an acceleration of software-related profits. We continue to believe that our operating margin will remain among the highest in the industry. So I think Tesla has been sacrificing hardware-related profits. In other words, the auto gross margin has been sacrificed a bit with the expectation that FSD will come. And there's been some talk about whether they have this new model for AI for Tesla Vision called the Foundation model. That's the final straw that gets them to the point where Tesla's full self-driving becomes better than human, safer than human, and it comes out of beta. And then a lot more people start buying FSD, and that increases revenue not only on the cars that you're producing now, but it increases revenue on the cars you produced before where people hadn't bought FSD yet. If you get to the point where FSD can drive and I can look at my phone and I don't have to touch the wheel, and I just have to wait, be ready in case you prompt me. Even if that's not full self-driving, if it's to the point where I no longer have to pay attention unless you tell me I got to pay attention, that's a big game changer for people. That allows us a lot of freedom in our cars. And I think a lot of people will pay for that. I'm not sure. And then Cybertruck remains on track to begin production later this year at Gigafactory, Texas. That's a promise that's been delivered on. They have begun production. In addition, we continue to make progress on our next generation platform. Will we get more information about next generation platform? I don't think we will, but we'll see. And there's a bunch of photos and charts. I'm going to skip over a lot of this stuff. I'm probably going to head into... There were some photos of Cybertruck that were released recently. So I'm going to head into... Including, it looks like there's two small pass-throughs from the cabin, from the main passenger cabin to the bed of the truck. I'm just... For those who are listening on Twitter, I'm scrolling through the document. We get to the financial statements. I don't think I have anything else I want to talk about in here, and the balance sheet. I don't think any of this is that important. I think I've covered all the important details that I need to cover. But this is the document that you're going to be looking at. I think it's Wednesday around 4:30 p.m. This document Eastern, that this document will be released, and that's going to be a big deal. So I'm going to turn now to the YouTube chat, and I'm going to see if anybody wants to speak on the Twitter space. Please request to speak, and I'll bring you up. The stock is, somebody said the stock is going up. Apparently I'm increasing the stock price. Let's see what the stock price is right now. What? Tesla 286.68. It's up about 2% today. I think that's massively underperforming what I would have expected. So you are committed to the vision of being a robo-taxi vendor. Oh, so that's a response to a question. Cody says those pass-throughs are on all trucks there to let pressure out when you close the doors. Thank you, Cody. I don't know that you're right or wrong. Oh, let's see. What do we got? Jojo Bot. And Dad, now there's a risk that speakers are. I'm Jojo Bot. You're live. Is there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, it's a little off subject, but in the 90s, the ice manufacturers were making smaller pickup trucks, and there was a huge market for them. But now, because of fuel economy standards, they refuse to make them, and a lot of people are buying full-size pickups instead, which seems to be counter to, it doesn't really save in fuel if you're buying these giant trucks, but I think there's a huge untapped market for small pickup trucks since the other manufacturers refuse to make them, like a Ranger or an S10.
Okay.
That's all I had to say.
Okay. So I don't know how much the YouTube audience was able to hear. Jojo Bot said advocated for smaller pickup trucks. And I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying he's wrong. I just wanted to mention that I personally think Tesla has to respond to demand. It seems like consumer demand is for bigger pickups, so Tesla's making bigger pickups. The Cybertruck is roughly the size of a Ford F-150 rather than a Ford Ranger. Elon has said in the past that for other markets like Europe, where larger trucks are a harder sell because of the size of the roads, that Tesla might make. I think he called it a Wolverine version of Cybertruck. But I don't think that's not. I appreciate the question. I don't think that's something that's really particularly relevant to this earnings call and what it means for the future of the company. And what I think the question that we have to ask is, what are we going to learn from this next earnings report from the shareholder deck and what is said in the earnings call? Mark Potocnik, one of the YouTube moderators, we have on my YouTube channel. I have a live stream going right now, and we have a chat. We have moderators. Mark Potocnik is one of the regulars. He says we're on the cusp of the fastest, deepest, most profound disruption of the energy sector in over a century, and on the cusp of the fastest, deepest, most consequential disruption of transportation in history. There are some really radical changes happening. I'm not sure. I think that electrification was a pretty big disruption of energy. In over a century, yes. Disruption in transportation in history. I think trains and cars, there were some pretty big radical changes in transportation in history. I do think this is going to be really substantial and it's really going to matter a lot. I don't know how you can compare them. So, all right, let me just go. I'm going through the YouTube chat here. Rob Markovich says, Warren, I can see Tesla scrapping their solar ambitions altogether and just buying solar from suppliers. For whatever reason, solar just isn't in Tesla's wheelhouse. I have a similar feeling. It doesn't seem like solar roof just isn't taking off. It seems like Tesla's solar panels are really, they're just buying panels from others and they're installing them on roofs. I have yet to, I think there's just a challenge. I think Tesla thinks it's important to deploy solar. They recognize that the existing solar industry is not deploying fast enough, and they think it's important to deploy more solar. I think what Tesla is going to do is probably deploy solar for itself rather than worrying about delivering it to consumers and businesses. They do have operations to try to deliver solar and power walls to private customers, commercial businesses, megapacks to commercial businesses, but really, in the end, it may just be that Tesla just deploys solar itself, builds its own solar farms, builds its own megapack farms, and becomes an electricity provider, at least to itself, because Tesla's demand for electricity is high. They have high demand for electricity in their AI training supercomputer cluster. They have high demand for electricity in the superchargers. They have high demand for electricity at their factories. So maybe, and we know, I think Tesla said that they expect to have 70 megawatt hours of solar panels on the roof of Giga Texas. 472 Water says, how many kids are you going to have? 11 like Musk. I thought he had 10, but that could be wrong. I don't have a particular count planned, and that's not really relevant to this video, so I'm not going to dive further into my childbearing plans or my child fathering plans. Matthew of TX says VPP is the end game for solar. That's a reference to virtual power plant. I think that virtual power plants are a useful tool, but if the problem is energy generation, then VPP is a small part of that story. I think megapack and virtual power plants are good for grid reliability, but they don't generate. You need to generate electricity, and generating electricity is going to be a huge limitation in the future. So, let's see. Just looking back on the chat, I don't see anybody else has requested to speak. I've been going for about 40 minutes. Um, Commuter Branchline asks Japan for a gigafactory. Why do you think that's a possibility? So let me address that question because I'm moving. For those who don't know, I'm moving to Japan not because I expect there to be a gigafactory in Japan. I have personal reasons why I'm moving to Japan and business reasons I'm moving to Japan. Um, Japan is the world's third largest car market after China and the United States. It's the fourth largest market if you consider China, North America, and Europe as the other three markets. But you know, if you were going to go that way, then you would say Asia, and Japan is part of Asia. Um, I think that the next generation vehicle will have a smaller footprint in terms of width and length, and so it'll be more effective on Japanese roads. And I think it'll be more cost effective. Japan, while it's the third largest car market, people are relatively less wealthy than Americans because their economy kind of stagnated. They're still wealthy by comparison to most of the world. So I think if they have a next generation vehicle that sells for around $20,000, I think it could sell like hotcakes in Japan. I was there. I don't think their supercharger infrastructure is very substantial, but it would not be hard for Tesla to roll out much. You know, it's a very dense country, so it would be easy to roll out a large volume of superchargers quickly if they needed to. Um, yeah, and you know, I will. The other thing about Japan is that Toyota is very, very powerful. Toyota is dominant in Japan, and Toyota probably doesn't want Tesla there, so I don't know if that would stop it. Oh, Sir says, Warren, why are you against the idea of a Model 3 refresh? For those who aren't familiar with this, there's a very popular topic called Project Highland. It seems like almost everyone in the Tesla influencer content creator community believes that Project Highland is real, that Tesla is going to be doing a major refresh of Tesla Model 3 now. In the face of all the evidence that it's not happening, and it's not that I'm against the idea of a Model 3 refresh. I think somewhere in the next few years, I think we could see a complete and total Model 3 redesign. I don't think look, Model S and X refresh did not increase sales of Model S and X. And it doesn't seem to have done a lot for Model S and X in general in terms of profits. So, and no, I don't think it would increase sales. I think Model 3 faces two problems. On the upside, it faces Model Y. Anybody who's thinking about buying a Model 3 can pay a little bit more and get a Model Y. And the vast majority of consumers, both in America and other countries, would rather have more space. And they'll pay a little bit more and they'll sacrifice a little bit of range to get that additional space that Model Y provides. It's a lot more space. I personally like the Model 3. I own a Model 3. I think Model 3 is really fun to drive. It's more fun to drive than Model Y. So on the upside, you've got Model Y cutting into Model 3 sales, just like Model 3 cut into Model S sales and Model Y cut into Model X sales. On the downside, you've got the next generation vehicle platform coming, and that I expect to produce a smaller vehicle that will cost less than Model 3. So the niche that Model 3 fits into is shrinking. So I'm not sure how Model 3 continues to survive. South J asks what my thoughts are on residential heat pumps. I don't know enough about heat pumps to have anything meaningful to say. Jupiter James says, why does Elon keep referring to wind as a viable source of energy, and why isn't Tesla in the wind business? I don't think Tesla has an advantage in the wind business that would make it make sense for Tesla to produce wind energy generation in high volumes, so they're not bothering to do it. The simple fact is that wind energy is growing, and it is becoming less expensive. So, will Tesla announce the Mexico groundbreaking? I don't think they know the Mexico groundbreaking date yet. Tipu Master says, can't wait for Highland, which is happening. So, all right. I don't see it. If anybody in the Twitter space has anything they want to say, please raise your hand. I'm happy to take comments from people. Dojo Bot, did you have anything else you wanted to say? I'm trying out this thing where I have like different people coming up, taking comments from the chat and taking comments from the Twitter space. I actually don't know if people on YouTube could hear the Dojo Bot. Did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I don't know. It's still off subject, but the smaller trucks, right now they're based on a curve of fuel economy based on their footprint. And yeah, I think there's just a huge market, and a lot of people are driving giant trucks when they would rather drive a smaller truck.
All right, so it sounds like you have a nice Southern or Texas accent, but I would say it seems like people want large. People can choose to buy a Ford Ranger for less than a Ford F-150, but they buy an F-150 anyway.
They don't make them as small as they used to. They don't make them like they used to, like in the 90s when they were smaller.
Oh, you're talking about like the little
footprint. If you made them like they did in the 90s, the same footprint, the fuel economy would have to be something like 45 miles a gallon. So the manufacturers just made bigger trucks, and the whole market is just gone.
Okay, so
I think there's a
I don't agree with you on fuel economy. I think fundamentally pickup trucks have poor aerodynamics, and I think that's unavoidable.
It's the government standards that make them to where the manufacturers just won't build them. They would have better economies being smaller, but they're held to such a higher standard because their footprint's smaller.
Okay, I mean, you can't hear. Thank you, Breton, for answering my question. So yeah, I guess my biggest thing is it seems to me that consumers have the choice of buying at least somewhat smaller pickups in like the Ford Ranger,
True.
and they're choosing to buy F-150s. I just know, like, I know a lot of truck owners, they like big trucks. And I think that Cybertruck will be, I think, slightly smaller than an F-150 with more interior space, a larger bed for comparable pricing or comparable, exterior size at least.
And still burning less fuel or no fuel, so that's good.
Well, it uses energy, and I think that the Cybertruck will be less efficient than the Model X. That's an important detail, by the way. I drive a Model X. It gets 3.3 miles a kilowatt hour EPA rated range, or 3.35. The Model 3 gets about 4.6 miles a kilowatt hour. The Model S gets about 4 miles a kilowatt hour. I expect Cybertruck to get at best 3 miles per kilowatt hour. So if the rumor I've heard is 140 kilowatt hour pack, if they get 3 miles per kilowatt hour on a 140 kilowatt hour pack, it's 420 miles of range. I have a feeling Elon would love to deliver 420 miles of range. Other people are predicting 350 miles of range for the first truck. If they decide that they're only going to sell the dual motor initially, which they promised 300 miles of range, and they delivered it with 350 miles of range, that would meet the promise and satisfy a lot of people and disappoint a lot of people who wanted the 500-mile range vehicle. So I think
at one point I recall Elon saying something about like a super extended range is kind of pointless. You're just carrying around extra batteries for no reason.
Right. So
for towing, I guess it would make sense.
So yes, I mean, as someone who drives a vehicle with 335 or 330 miles of range on a long trip, the additional range really does matter when you're going 85 miles an hour, because you don't really get 330 miles of range when you're going 85 miles an hour. You get 200 miles of range at 85 miles an hour. And if you throw a trailer on the back, then you're lucky if you get 100 miles of range. So if you're towing a trailer, if you're carrying, the weight doesn't seem to affect range that much on Teslas because they're much more driven on the highway by drag being the problem. Yeah. And Cybertruck's going to have a lot of drag. It's going to have worse drag. It's going to have a higher frontal surface area than Model X, and it's going to have a worse coefficient of drag. So the only way Cybertruck even manages to get 3 miles a kilowatt hour is if the 1,000-volt powertrain architecture and the 48-volt, and they get some weight reductions in different ways, and they maybe have the disengagement of the rear motors when they're at highway speed. There may be some things they can do to try to squeeze out a little bit more range. I have a feeling they're not even going to achieve 3 miles per kilowatt hour. It's probably going to be more like 2.8. But we'll see what that turns into. And can they get to 400 miles of range on that vehicle? I don't know. And your point about if you're not towing, having 500 plus miles of range is most of the time a waste of mass. And if you want to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy and you have a limited number of battery cells, making vehicles with smaller battery packs allows you to make more vehicles, which allows you to get more people into electric vehicles and out of internal combustion engine vehicles. And that accelerates the transition more than making the 500-mile range vehicle that makes friends of mine happy who really want a 500-mile range truck to tow. I'm going to guess that less than 20% of pickup truck owners tow anything on more than a very occasional basis. So Breton in the YouTube chat says the vast majority of pickup trucks are work commuters and for picking up groceries at Target and taking the kids to soccer, right? Elon Fanboy says they need a large SUV. I have many family members who have kids and dogs, and I know they wouldn't buy a Y. They need a large SUV. So Model X is a large SUV, but it's too expensive. If they could make a large SUV that was like a Model Y, but had the third row of a Model X, you give up on the Falcon Wing doors. You give up on a few other excesses. I love the excesses in my Model X. Don't get me wrong. If you give up on a few of those and you can get your manufacturing costs down, thank you, Mark, for gifting a membership. If you can get the manufacturing costs down, then you can get the price down under $80,000, and then you may be able to sell a much